I'm Leo Walder for Kit Guru, and the case I'm reviewing today is the Corsair Carbide 275R. It is a case that, as far as I can see, has no new or unique features whatsoever, with one possible exception, which is that the tempered glass panel is secured by 4 Allen screws. And Corsair provides the requisite 4mm Allen key so you can remove those Allen screws to take off the glass. That's how I'm going to start this review, just so you can get a better look inside the case. So in a sense, I'm already doing away with the one unique feature of this brand new case. As you can see, the glass is lightly tinted. Nothing too dramatic. We've seen some really heavily tinted glass recently, not least from the Corsair Obsidian 500 as it happens. These screws are not captive, but they sit in sort of grommets, and the grommets in turn are not captive. They push out if you're not careful. I've had this panel off 5, maybe 6 times doing a bit of photography, doing the build and such like. The threads are already looking shiny, and they've got some white paint on them, which suggests the case was painted and then the panel was mounted and the threads hadn't been masked, which is the sort of thing you expect with a cheap piece of engineering. The Corsair Carbide 275R is available in a total of 4 different versions, but that's black and white, clearly this is white, and either acrylic or glass panel. The difference in price in the UK is £65 for acrylic, £75 for glass. Both prices strike me as rather steep, but nonetheless I don't see the point in Corsair having the acrylic over here. I don't know whether they're going to have the acrylic over here, but if they do, I don't see the point in going for the acrylic, because if you're spending quite a bunch of money on what is a relatively budget case, then you might just well go all out and have the glass while you're at it. I read a comment on a recent review, actually, the Obsidian 500, where someone was saying they quite liked the idea of an acrylic rather than glass side panel, which is totally lost on me. To my mind, if you've gone glass, you don't go back to acrylic, and that's all there is to it. Glass is just better in every respect, in my opinion. Now, this case, if I was to cover up the logo there, which is just a little bit of paint, it's not even a stuck-on kind of shiny Corsair logo, it's a bit of paint. If I covered that up, I would honestly struggle to tell you whether this was a Game Max, a Fantex, a Corsair, or a Fractal case. It's got a kind of a bit of everything of early 2018 about it. So Corsair has avoided the most obvious problem, which is that air can clearly flow in through this slot, or these slots, one either side of the front panel, go through the front filter, through the single front fan, into the case. So although the air has to turn, it can at least get in. The case is not hermetically sealed. Corsair knows how to spec and build a case, and they do not generally make bad moves. This case works. That's the fundamental thing. But beyond that, it has very little to offer. It looks quite sleek. It's got plain panels all over. So if I pull off the front panel, which does take quite a tug, there we go, nothing broken. And you can see it is just a plain white panel. And it's sort of striking me as a bit Fantexy. And then we have behind it a magnetic filter, like so. And down bottom we have a little LED strip, which is pure white light. And then we have a single SP120 fan, which is non-RGB, and another SP120 fan at the rear. And that's pretty much it. I can pull off the side panel at the rear, which was a bit of a fight to get on. Captive thumb screws, no noise deadening material. And that's pretty much it. For the build, I've chosen to use a Gigabyte Z370 Aorus Ultra gaming motherboard. The processor I've gone for is a Coffee Lake, but it's a Core i5-8400, which strikes me as the sort of processor you would logically use in a case like this. We've got some Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 memory. The reason I've specifically gone for that rather than, for example, some Corsair RGB memory, which would have been my preference, is that you need to use low profile memory if you want to install a liquid cooler in the roof of the case. It supports up to a 240mm cooler, and I have indeed gone for a 240mm Corsair H100i V2 all-in-one, so I've done the business in that respect. I had to use the low profile LPX memory in order that the cooler would clear it. This is one of the bugbears of cases. Cases in general, but specifically budget cases, you never get enough space in the roof. Were this case to be 10mm taller, maybe even 5mm, you could use whichever memory you wanted. You could use some tall RGB memory, no problem whatsoever. You could use memory that wasn't RGB, it had a tall heatsink, and you'd basically have a blank palette. But no, you have to use low profile memory if you want to put a liquid cooler in the roof. Now, I could have put the H100 in the front had I so chosen. In actual fact, the front supports either a 280 or a 360 cooler, so you have many options. Nonetheless, the roof seemed the best place because I wanted to use the stock fans. It's sort of the preference. If they supply the fans, why not use the fans? Having said that, these are the pretty much the dullest and most basic fans that Corsair makes, but they work reasonably well, and they're also actually very quiet. And I'm sitting here now, the thing whirring away, I can't hear it. So, around the back of the case we have the power supply, which is a Corsair RM1000i. It's the special edition that came to us in white, which seemed entirely appropriate. So the cables that you can see are the cables that come with that limited edition power supply. They're not aftermarket. We've run into the thing again, which is modular power supplies take up more space than a regular power supply. And when you plug in the cables, you're taking up what tiny amount of clearance there is in front of the power supply for those cables. The drive bays are obscured. In fact, I've removed one of the two sleds just to give me somewhere to cram some of the cabling, which tends to be the way of the world with cases such as this. So you've got the stealth drive tower down the back of the case, you've got the two caddies therein which can take either 2.5 or 3.5 inch drive. It all works perfectly well, but it takes up a great portion of what little space is available. You've also got a couple of sleds on the back of the panel for two SSDs. So in terms of drives that you could install, you've got many options, but a few millimeters extra here and there would have made a massive amount of difference to the ease of build. In terms of features, you can't argue that Corsair's covered the basics, and I really do mean the basics. So you have this top magnetic dust filter, which doesn't sit entirely nicely on the screws for the liquid cooler. Fractal does a better job with that. Fractal has the common sense to move one of these magnetic strips inboard, so it will clear the screw heads. Costs presumably absolutely zilch. Slightly nicer to look at. We've got a power supply filter around the back, one of those tiddly little jobs. And as mentioned, we have the filter that goes on the front. So fully filtered, no arguments there. It looks clean and tidy, air can flow straight through, which is pretty much the only feature that Corsair claims for this case. Once the air's got in the front, of course, were it to have the Fractal Meshify front panel, air would just flow directly through instead of having to go through turns. But temperatures are no problem whatsoever, so our Core i5 8400 idled at 37 Celsius, went up to 52 under load. The GTX 1080 Ti graphics card idled at 43, went up to 73 under load. No complaints there whatsoever, and that was running Firmark. It works. There's nothing to complain about. There's nothing to point at and go, that is wrong, you need to change this thing, although were it slightly taller, that would certainly help. A bit more space here and there, that would help. But it works. As this PC sits here, it's a decent, competent gaming PC. Core i5, GTX 1080 Ti, Corsair liquid cooler, air flows, temperature's good, bunch of memory, happy. Now, in terms of new features, zilch. So you've got a couple of USB 3.0s on the I/O, you've got headset jacks, you've got a power button, you've got a reset button. Seen it a million times before. The I/O is captive to the core chassis, so therefore you haven't got to have cables trailing when you yank off the front panel. That's fine. This tiddly little light here, I mean, could they have done any less with the lighting? I think not. The lighting inside the case, which is mainly provided by the Aorus motherboard, but also from the EVGA GTX 1080 Ti, looks pleasant enough. Whether you want a Fandango lighted chassis is, the RGB argument goes on and on and on. But here's the point. There are a great many manufacturers who offer you a chassis with the option of RGB and glass and possibly a fan controller or some such, and it will be cheaper than this case. Now here's the thing about the pricing of Corsair cases, and it does feel like flogging a dead horse to say that Corsair knows how to charge for their cases. We know this. Corsair charges a premium, the customers seem happy to pay for it, they get into the Corsair ecosystem, people grumble and complain, Corsair goes from strength to strength. Let's take all that just as read. The fact is this case is £75 in the UK. I don't actually know what it's going to be on sale at, but that's the list price, but let's say it's going to be 75. We've seen many cases at this sort of price level and cheaper that offer more features. We've seen cases from GameMax around the £40 mark, and we've seen the budget Fantex models. They offer RGB and such like. This case essentially offers nothing that is exciting. I guess it fills some hole in the Corsair portfolio, but the idea they brought this case out in early 2018 really surprises me. It could have come out in 2016. There's nothing about it, nothing that is innovative. The drive bays, the little bit of lighting, the dead ordinary I/O panel, stuff we've seen a million times before. All the features have been brought together in another case that's perfectly okay. Now, had Corsair brought this case out and said, finally a really budget Corsair case, and it's 40, 45, 50 pounds, you go, well, yes, all right. That's rare territory for Corsair to dabble in. This case fits that bill. But no, it's £75. Question is it going to hurt Corsair? I'm going to say not. Now, the next time I reach for a case to build a cheap PC I'm flinging together a member of the family, sure, I'd use this case. Why wouldn't I? I've got it. It's free to me. Of course I'll use it. It's a perfectly competent case. It makes no mistakes. There's nothing to dislike. It is the very definition of the word vanilla. But having said that, I cannot see why you would rush out to buy it. There are other cases on the market that offer better features, that have similar or better build quality. I just cannot see anything about this case that says, yep, this is the reason to buy it. The one difference I came across was the glass panel held on with those 4 Allen screws, which is actually the one thing I really don't like about the case. Lining up the screws, getting the threads in place, not great. Build quality, it feels like another few times on and off, and one of those threads might give me a problem. Having said that, how many times do you take the side panel off your case? I shouldn't think very often. I've already done it more times than most people would in the lifetime of their Carbide 275R. So that's my biggest complaint about the case. It's possibly the least relevant complaint. To my mind, we may have reached peak Corsair. The Carbide 275R has no obvious reason to exist. It's a competent case. Corsair has a great many cases in their portfolio. This does not appear to break any new ground whatsoever. And once again, the price is ouchy. But when you're at this price point, there are so many other better cases on the market, more exciting cases, more interesting cases. It's just totally lost on me why anyone would consider buying the Carbide 275R. So that's the conundrum. It's a case that has no problems whatsoever, and yet it has no appeal to me whatsoever. If you like this video, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. If you want more from Kit Guru, click to subscribe. I'm Leo Waldock. This is the Corsair Carbide 275R.